Hi, this is Lenny Pfeffer, President of the Dorchester County Council, and you're listening to the Maryland Association of Counties Conduit Street Podcast, the source for news and notes on Maryland's policy and politics.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. This is Michael Sanderson taking the mic and the reins today. And I'm happy to be joined by a special guest, a longtime friend of mine and a colleague in the county community, Todd Mohn. He is the Queen Anne's County Administrator. He's a longtime county engineer, and I'm delighted that you can make some time to join us for the podcast today, Todd. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
Well, for our listeners, let me tee this up a little bit. A couple times over the last few weeks on the podcast, we have made mention of the Train Commission. It's the Transportation Revenue and Infrastructure Needs Commission. Maryland has decided to bring together a lot of stakeholders to talk about transportation projects and funding and so forth. And we have spent a little bit of time talking about that charge and a little bit about MACO presenting before that panel and transportation issues generally. And a couple times we sort of said, let's put a pin in this because we want to talk in a little more detail. So I want to deliver on that today. Todd is actually one of the appointed members of the Train Commission, and he, along with MACO President Calvin Ball from Howard County, the Howard County Executive and 2023 MACO President, are members of that commission and have been among the folks who are hip deep in looking at transportation financing, project selection, and so forth. So we already wanted to get Todd to join the podcast anyway. But layer on top of that, the talk of the town lately has been transportation funding and cutbacks and so forth. This felt like exactly the right time to talk transportation. So you ready to spend a little time on that, Todd?
Absolutely. Let me first just say that it was an honor for myself to be selected to be a member of the Train Commission. It's quite been a good experience for me as a longtime engineer and now county administrator to be recognized by the governor to participate on this very, very important subject matter, for all of Maryland residents. So I must say I'm delighted and honored to be a member of the commission.
I'm happy to hear that. And I think Marylanders generally don't realize the time and investment that comes from basically volunteers who commit their time and effort to things like this. A Blue Ribbon Commission on Transportation, or a task force to deal with some public safety issue, or an advisory panel that oversees some state agency and the services they deliver. There's lots and lots of people who are, in my judgment, unsung heroes for giving sort of citizen level guidance for lots of things, and sometimes guiding important policy or important services. So hats off to you for contributing your time and expertise, along with a pretty star-studded panel of people from different walks of life and different parts of government and thereabouts. So the commission's underway. It's got a 2-year charge. Let's talk about that in a second. But for our listeners' benefit, maybe not everybody knows what a county administrator is and does. So can you give us a little bit of the ABCs on your role with Queen Anne's County government and how you got there from your beginnings on the public works and county engineer side?
Well, certainly, being the county administrator has a tremendous amount of facets, as anybody can imagine. I mean, I've got 10 very different departments that form our county government here, and of course, various outside agencies that have to sort of manage budgetarily, including the sheriff's office, of course, the big gorilla, the Board of Education, and that's a story for another day. We know what's happening there with the Kerwin Commission, so that's everyone's big gorilla right now. But Public Works, prepared me ideally for this role because of my background and knowledge of the county as a whole. I was 30, I've been here in Queen Anne's County now going on 32 years. Most of those were with the Department of Public Works. I came up through the ranks, through the roads division. I was deputy director and then director of Public Works for over 10 years. And it prepared me very well because I got to interact with all the other agencies and departments within the government. And now as the county administrator, I have the the opportunity now to work and mentor and develop all of these departments so we can achieve, common, county objectives that are given to me from the leadership of my county commissioners. And we do have a great group here of county commissioners, I will say that, in Queen Anne's County. So there's a lot of different facets. Currently, we're also working on, as another example, outside of Public Works, a regional detention center, which is another cutting edge project for the state of Maryland, where we're going to try to regionalize 3 different counties together and build a regional detention facility to suit this area. So and save hopefully millions of dollars for the taxpayers of Maryland.
So, all right. So I think that context is helpful. You got promoted out of the public works universe, and now you're the big picture guy. I mean, I've been a guest sometimes before your county commissioners, and you sit at sort of alongside the county commissioners as the elected county commissioners, serve in that sort of dual role as a legislative body, but also in an administrative capacity. And you're the COO or chief administrative officer. The county agencies report through you, and you offer guidance to them and so forth. So it's a big role. I know MACO as an organization, we rely really heavily on the county administrators, especially in the medium and small size counties. We can rely on the county administrators to be the person to go to and say, hey, wait, are you having this trouble with animal control? Because one of your neighboring counties is, we'd like to put them in touch if you can help them. And the county administrator is frequently the Jack or Jill of all trades to be able to say, who do I talk to, right?
So that's okay. Absolutely right. We have all kinds of complaints, and anything from Parks and Rec to animal bites, animal control, community services, public safety, our detention facility, police, force, sheriff's department. So it's a wide range of things. And as I mentioned too, the big gorilla, the Board of Education. We do have a great relationship with our board, but as we know, that's a huge part of our annual budget, and growing, obviously, because of the Kerwin Commission blueprint coming forward.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So that sets the stage a little bit, and I know I would be remiss if I missed an opportunity to give props to the other affiliate of ours that you still have connections with, the County Engineers Association of Maryland. That's a group that's really active, engaged on behalf of their members with educational opportunities and so forth. Every once in a while, the MACO staff and sometimes I get a chance to speak to that group about a policy issue or legislative matters and so forth. But that's a good group to work with, and your name's got to be on plaques all over that group, because I know you've got a long history with CM, right?
Yeah, I'll give a nice shout out to the County Engineers Association of Maryland. It's been a wonderful group. I've been fortunate enough to have been selected and elected as the president of the County Engineers Association of Maryland in my tenure with them, not once but twice. And over my tenure there, and it's a wonderful team, members all over the state. And I will say that unlike county administrators, county execs, typically the public works guys, they literally have decades of experience, and they usually stay in their jobs for decades on end. County execs, county administrators sometimes come and go a little more quickly than public works guys, but it's a great group. I'm still active with them, and we have great conferences twice a year. So it's I got my roots there. So thanks.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm amazed when sometimes I hear from other states that the county engineer is one of those elected row officer positions. They elect like the county auditor and coroner and all these other positions. But like county engineer sounds like exactly the sort of role where having a 14-year veteran who's been there and done that just serves you so well. And anyway, not to cast aspersions on our friendly sister states who have that other model, but I'm glad we can rely on a group like CM here. So all right, so let's get to the issue of the moment. I wanted to talk about transportation and funding and planning and so forth. So I'll set the stage and kind of back into the Train Commission. At the moment, we just came off MACO's big winter conference, and we just had our big event with hundreds of people gathered in Dorchester County and talking about the issues of the day. And we plan an agenda weeks and months in advance. But lo and behold, the governor and the Department of Transportation make an announcement right before our conference. We're going to have to do a bunch of serious belt tightening in transportation. That made that sort of the talk of the town. And up and down the hallways, everybody's talking about transportation cuts and what it would mean to their county. And one of the first questions I kept hearing was, well, I thought there was this blue ribbon panel that was supposed to come up with all the answers on transportation. Now, that's probably not fair, but let's start there. You're a member of the Train Commission. That's a group that was appointed with a 2-year charge to try and dig into these financing issues and what are the needs and what are the cost drivers and so forth. That group doesn't feel like it's quite ready to handle, hey, we've got all the solutions to everything. Their target was sort of the end of next year, not this November, December. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. But the governor did request an interim report at the end of the first year, which we discussed that and debated the recommendations on that just yesterday. So we provided that to the governor based on his request. But yeah, we have a whole nother year to kind of dig into the details. If you watched any of that presentation, that meeting yesterday, you can sort of get the flavor that a lot of the members were a little hesitant to be as specific about some of the recommendations. So we were able to sort of, generalize some of those, but it comes down to where are we going to come up with the additional monies necessary to take care of all of Maryland's transportation needs, which includes, transit, highways, the airport, the ports. There's the modal administration at MDOT is huge. And they have a huge budget, also a huge, budget shortfall currently because of costs and the lack of gasoline sales, which has peaked. We believe that the gasoline tax, which largely funds the Transportation Trust Fund, has peaked out in the year 2019. So that's on the decline. And with EV sales, electric vehicles and plug-in sales and more efficient, cars in general, we're using less fossil fuels. Gasoline tax is already fairly high at 47 cents. So we're looking at ways to manage the budget going forward. And we got into it. We've only been meeting since earlier this year. We've had 5 meetings now. So we have a whole nother, year to sort of formulate and refine those recommendations. But so we're more to come on that for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see those recommendations, and they may potentially lead to action by the General Assembly. This commission was charged with make some recommendations on areas they should focus on. And as you mentioned, I did watch the decision meeting earlier this week from the Train Commission, and the members kind of worked their way to consensus on a variety of things. We did some little navel gazing on this podcast several weeks ago about that interesting policy issue of how do you gather revenue from electric vehicles if the user pays model is embodied by motor fuel taxes. And years ago, it was like, hey, if you're on the road, you're burning gas, you pay tax on your gas, and that's basically your fee for using the public roads that we're going to have to patch up because of your driving on that. And philosophically, I think lots of voters and taxpayers feel like that's pretty good policy. For the most part, the user bears the responsibility for the maintenance and operation, all that kind of stuff. So that makes sense, but that logic starts to break down as you have more and more vehicles on the road who don't use motor fuel or use way less. And some of them are even heavy vehicles with those big batteries inside the electric vehicles. They may even be doing more wear and tear on the roads. I think it's a fascinating policy question. And sadly, my kids have to hear me talk about this sort of thing. I find it fascinating. Our podcast listeners, hopefully they find it fascinating. And the commission, sort of wrestled with that. I guess the General Assembly will take it up as well to say what to do there. So Train Commission is looking at the big picture stuff and probably on target to have some big picture recommendations around this time next year. But that doesn't tend to what apparently the state Department of Transportation sees as we've got to act now because we've got a big shortfall in the 6-year plan ahead of us. As for folks who are not Annapolis insiders, the Department of Transportation notoriously releases at various times of the year a draft and then a final consolidated transportation plan. That's sort of these are the big projects that we have planning for, funding for, and we're gonna the money's going to show up in this year and so forth. And sort of a moving 6-year window of what's on target. And we're short. I mean, all those conspiring factors, the softness in the gas tax revenue and cost inflation and just existing projects and, probably other emerging projects that are going to weasel their way in and become high priorities. You end up with, we're upside down in the 6-year plan, and you can't just wait it out and solve the problem 3 years deep. So we're looking at budget cuts, and I'm interested in having you'd put on your other hat as a county leader, the county administrator who's helping to build the priorities for a local government. You want to keep your roads safe and maintain and so forth. In the governor and department's plan, we see, lo and behold, there's a cutback to highway user revenues. Now, not everybody who's listening to the podcast is going to know what that means, but the super short version is Queen Anne's County and the other local governments, we don't have any transportation revenues. There's some states where there are local gas taxes or you get money on the license plate or other things like that. But in Maryland, everything is gathered by the state. And then there are distributions back to the locals to take care of the lion's share of the roads that we maintain. I think last time we counted it was like 83% of the road miles are maintained by local governments, not the state. They used to send 30 cents on the dollar of most of those state transportation revenues back to the cities and counties. You were in Queen Anne's County back in 2009 when we had some summertime blues. The Great Recession was upon us. The state made a really deep cut there. Do you remember what that was like and the sort of fallout of losing so much of our highway user revenues?
Well, I certainly remember that. They aren't fond memories, but it was a terrible time. It was a terrible time for us because before that, I mean, we enjoyed every year we got money from the state, the highway user revenues, which is largely gasoline motor fuel tax. We received that, and it had to be used for highway maintenance, period. And we had to sign a statement every year, send it back to the MDOT saying that I attest that I used every penny in road maintenance. I couldn't use it for anything else except for highway maintenance. And we had a substantial budget. We had a great workforce. I had about 65 employees, and we did everything from soup to nuts on our road system. We built new roads, we replaced bridges, we bought equipment. I mean, the highway user revenue source, the funding from the state, completely 100% provided us enough revenue to maintain the 565 miles of county roadways that we had in Queen Anne's County at that time.
Yeah.
Then, we got wind that, we were going to see some cutbacks. That happened, a few years prior to that, and the state sort of paid that back. But this time we weren't so sure. It was about a 90 or 95% cut, and we sort of knew it was coming, and we fought it. I think you and I and some of your colleagues went down to the General Assembly those years and, screamed, we can't survive without, the HURs. We can't survive these cuts. And lo and behold, well, we all know the story. They cut the money anyway. The one little piece of saving grace that helped for a period of a year or two was back then we had, I think it was called stimulus or ERA money. It was some federal got pushed down to the counties. That, bought us a little bit of time and allowed us here in Queen Anne's, and I'm sure other jurisdictions, to keep the workforce on. We got some money, that took us a couple of years. We spent all our reserves that we had. And then, it came to be doomsday. So we here in Queen Anne's County, we had to actually lay off members of the workforce. We had early out packages so we could reduce, the workforce in that fashion. And it was painful. It was painful. So the roads division at that time, I was the chief roads engineer during that time period. And we went from a workforce of 65 down to about 30, which greatly curtailed our ability to do things that our citizens, really enjoyed and frankly demand. I mean, we have to maintain our roads, cut the grass, keep the drainage flowing, all the things, pick up trash. And it was a struggle for many, many years. In fact, we had one policy that we developed, for snow removal. And it was the public destroyed us on it, really, because we said, well, we're not going to even come out with a snowplow until there's 3 inches of snow on the ground on the roadways. And it was just, it was horrible. I mean, people just crucified us. So, we slowly had to integrate and provide for those services through the general fund, through the general tax base, which isn't really a road user charge, it's property taxes to fortify, the road's operations. But since that time, we've slowly clawed back with the help of general fund revenues to provide services, and we're still not back to that level where we were in the heyday of highway user revenues prior to those huge cuts, unfortunately. So we still have things that we can't do as far as road construction, bridge construction. So we're sorry about that, but we are gaining some ground. But now we're looking at some more cuts. We felt like we were kind of getting back and hoping that HUR would sort of get restored, at least if not fully, to a point where we could maintain. But these cuts, couldn't come at a worse time for us.
Yeah, I mean that narrative is exactly like that's the mother lode of what I wanted to bring to the podcast. That you haven't been there, you're the boots on the ground, but haven't seen what it meant to the workforce, the number of projects you could do, and the number of things that you could tend to on behalf of the residents was just wiped out. As I recall, you were exactly right. The state made a cut during the legislative session. They said you guys are going to lose 100, and then it turned into like 160 million bucks. And we sort of didn't say yes, but we said, hey, if like a year or two of losses of that magnitude is what it takes to get through this great recession, and that's our part, we get it. I mean, we don't like it, but we get it. And then it was the legislature goes home, the budget is passed, and it's something like the 1st of August. The brand new fiscal year has just kicked off, and everybody already had their belt tightening. Losing 160 million bucks was a big loss. And then suddenly the Board of Public Works here's this proposal. We're going to take 90% of what's left. And it left, like Queen Anne's County is down to something like 7 cents on the dollar of where they had been in a budget that you've already passed, right? It was, I mean, the timing was awful. The consequences were awful. And the fact that it wasn't just hey, 1 or 2 years of suffering, then we'll be back on track is the perverse twist here, that this wasn't put right back like a lot of things were following the big recession. It turned out they shuffled the deck around and so forth and ended up redirecting those dollars to state transportation needs. And we've been just clawing our way back. I think, the latest plan from a couple of years ago was going to get the counties up to around 30 cents on the dollar. That doesn't sound great, right? That's just a couple of first downs for the Ravens. That's not a touchdown. That's not even a field goal. That's just, a couple of catches, right? But the 30-yard line is better than the 3-yard line. So we're making some progress moving in the right direction. And now, I'm going to torture this analogy, but now this is like the penalty that calls back the last winning play. We got 2nd and 15. I don't know what we do here, but that's what this means for the local governments, for the proposal on the table to say we're not going to be able to take the next step with highway user, even though there was this big bipartisan consensus to do it just a couple of years ago. Is I don't know. I saw it on social media as a gut punch, and that's not an unfair phrasing, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's devastating for us because we felt like we were gaining some ground, and now we hear that even State Highway has threatened and done some saber rattling and say, well, we're not going to mow as much grass. We're not going to pick up trash on the state roads. And, folks aren't going to like that very much when that starts to happen. And they're going to cry to the local elected officials, my bosses, my leadership. Yeah. And they're going to want answers as what's going on here. Why can't we get these state roads, the grass cut and keep them maintained looking nice? But it's going to be challenging for all of us going forward. There's no question about it.
Yeah, we put some information on the Conduit Street blog on the Mako website with sort of a Q&A style walkthrough of where these cuts come from, how do they affect the counties differently, and so forth, and tried to put some context around that. But the thing that I couldn't do in writing that up was the narrative of what this meant when this happened in August of 2009. It was the Great Recession, and a lot of services were temporarily cut back because the governments tend to be counter-cyclical, and revenues dry up during a recession, but then a lot more people show up at your health clinic. They show up on Medicaid. They show up asking for assistance with rental assistance and other things like that. Bad economies make for higher demand, but lower supply of services. And it's a really tough spot. We tend to be in weird decision-making in that environment, but the best way out of it is you patch up the things you messed up when you had the couple of tough years. In this case, they really just never did that. And I guess dialing way back further, it wasn't like this share of highway user revenues going back to counties and cities. That wasn't a new idea. That's been around for as long as I've been on this planet. I think, the gas tax and the distribution through highway user revenue goes back to the late 1960s. So it was decades and decades of this is the fair way to do things. Baltimore City has this one-of-a-kind charge where they take care of almost all the state roads in Baltimore City. So, they're on an island unto themselves, but the other counties and cities have this big responsibility. You said how many road miles in Queen Anne's again?
About 565 right now, currently, which, as you mentioned earlier, it's about 85% of the roads in our county are our county local roadways that we are obligated to maintain for our constituents here in the county.
Right. That's no small undertaking, and like you've woven into your thoughts here, like this is stuff people really care about. If you can't plow the street, if you can't patch the pothole, those are things that people get on the horn. They get mad. They'll call their senator. They'll call their county commissioner. They'll call the governor. All that stuff happens because this is quality of life stuff. Anyway, we know that tough fiscal times make for difficult decisions, and it's not like the governor set out to say, let's sting the local governments first and hardest. I don't think this is that case. We weren't singled out for peculiar and unusual treatment. They're cutting back in all their different modes and so forth. So they're proposing difficulty in every part of transportation, but boy, are we going to feel this at the local level on the roads that get you home.
There's no question about it. And the one thing about local government is that we're right here, right next to our constituents and boots on the ground, as you put it. And we hear from our constituents loud and clear. My leadership, my commissioners get those phone calls. They see these people when they go to the grocery store and they go shopping and they ask questions and they don't understand why we can't do what they need, what they demand us to do as far as maintaining our highway system, providing other services, police, fire, public safety, community services, all those things, having nice parks. I mean, something has to give. We can't do everything in light of funding cutbacks, and especially at a time like this.
Right. Yeah, that's well put. That's the conundrum, and I don't think anybody loves this. I don't think the Department of Transportation is delighted to be making calls to local leaders and to other stakeholders and talking about the array of cuts they've got on the table. There's nothing easy about this, so I've got sympathy for them, but I also have sympathy for the folks who are trying to properly maintain safe roads locally and finding, oh boy, that leg of the stool is looking softer than it was. So
yeah.
So let me take a moment. As we were trying to get you on the podcast, you were sending emails from faraway locations. I know you took some personal time away from the county, away from the job, and did some traveling internationally. So while I've got you on, I can't help but ask. I'm guessing you're a little bit like me, and wherever you go and whatever you do, you still kind of wear the hat of the shop a little bit with you. So as you were out in far corners of the globe, is there anything that you take back or that you saw with your county administrator eyes or even with your county engineer eyes that might be interesting to share with an audience of podcast listeners who like policy and politics?
Well, it's funny you ask that because we had a wonderful trip. My wife and some friends. We went to Southeast Asia. We flew from New York City to Singapore, and we were there for about a week, and then off to Bali in Indonesia. But I will say that in Singapore, which is a city, country, state,
right,
a tremendous transportation system there as far as transit goes. I mean, they have subways. You can go anywhere you just get on the subway, click your Apple Pay phone to get on and ride anywhere in the city. It's wonderful. It's state of the art, probably one of the best in the country. But as far as transportation and vehicles and roads, the roads are beautiful and well maintained. And there's no congestion. So I had to ask some friends that I knew there why this is. And basically over there, if you want to buy a motor vehicle in Singapore, I'll give you the analogy. It's like buying a PSL license for a Ravens, stadium. You buy what they call a certificate of entitlement, right? You buy that, and the government only issues so many of those in the whole country, so they're hard to come by. So a general certificate of entitlement costs about $76,000.
Holy smokes.
Holy smokes is right. Then you got to buy a car. Now that's for like a 4-cylinder engine. If you go with a V8, it costs more. So needless to say, there weren't very many Corvettes over there. I did see 2 in my week in Singapore, but a Toyota Prius over there, fully loaded with the certificate of entitlement, is about $220,000 for the local folks. So most people only have one car, like I had in my family when I was growing up. We had one, Chevrolet station wagon, right, that we had to share around with my mom and my dad. But quite different over there. Not as many cars. I think the per capita vehicle count in Singapore is about 150 per thousand, where here in U.S. it's about 1-to-1. It's about 1,000 per thousand. Right. So you see the difference, and that's how they control not only congestion but provide certainly adequate revenues to maintain their transportation system over there. And I almost failed to mention the certificate of entitlement, your PSL license for your seat. It expires in 10 years. So
you got to go back.
You got to go back and renew that every 10 years. So it's a pretty expensive endeavor to own a car in Singapore. Yeah.
Well, and Singapore presents a whole different density tier than even the like built up parts of Kent Island as a component of Queen Anne's County. There's nothing that approaches. Almost no place on the planet has the same kind of density and urban suburban flow as the city state of Singapore. As I understand it, it's skyscrapers everywhere, and it's bordering on looking like Blade Runner. I've never been. It's on the list of places I'd really love to visit, though.
Yeah, I would encourage you to go. It's a wonderful city. It's very clean. It's very safe. The subway system is immaculate. It's multi-levels. There's supermarkets, below the street levels that you wouldn't even know were there till you get out of the subway. And it's a delightful multicultural place, and lots to see and do.
All right. Well, thanks for the field report. We spend a lot of time, navel gazing and talking about Annapolis, and sometimes we get as far as Princess Anne, and sometimes we get as far as Guam. We're big on Guam, but this is our first report from the field in Singapore, so that's good. It's expanding our horizons. I love it.
Well, I'm happy to do that. Happy to provide that insight. It was a wonderful trip.
Well, glad to hear, and I hope you got a good relaxation time, as well as getting kick around and look at public infrastructure. Hey, Todd, thanks so much for carving out some time talking to us and to our listeners. We love getting into policy and politics and all this kind of stuff, and you've been in the middle of all this stuff as the administrator of one of our counties, but also as a stakeholder in this transportation commission. We'll stay in touch with you and with the commission going forward. All those issues are going to be important, and the proposed budget cuts are not a done deal. Some of the stuff has to go through the legislative process, so we've got a debate ahead on all that sort of stuff. This is a live and continuing issue. Todd, thanks so much for joining today.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much.
Folks, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Conduit Street Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, please go ahead and subscribe. That way you'll get every episode sent right to the device of your choice. Follow Mako on social media. That's the Conduit Street blog. And of course, all the various places where you can find your clicks and your tweets and your follows and all that sort of stuff. Are we still doing tweets? I don't know. Anyway, so with that, I'm Michael Sanderson, thanking Todd Mohn, and we will talk to you soon.